And Audacity in 3.
I can't do Audacity.
Oh, okay. And it's recording.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode is going to be pretty interesting. So the idea for this episode came from, I was on a consultation call with someone, and she asked me something that no one has ever asked me before. So after the call, and she was making the decision and just kind of asking about the program, and she asked, like, what makes clients successful? Like the clients that finish the program, they've made a successful transformation. Like, what about them allows them to be successful? And then she asked another question, like, for those who don't complete the program or are not successful, like, what about them? Like, what are some traits? And I brought it up to Marissa, and she was like, ooh, like, yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah, for sure. And I was thinking about this. This is on topic, but off topic. The name of our podcast, Barbell Lifestyle, like the number of times we actually talk about like anything that has to do with the barbell is like so slim.
Yeah.
I just thought that was funny. Like it just occurred to me like the other day because I was asking a potential guest that we may have on the show if they wanted to come on our show, and they were like, sure, what's your show about? And I was like, oh, it's the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast where we talk mainly about mindset. um, and like personal development and growth, but training's in there too. So I just thought that was funny. But on that note, a lot of people might think, I feel like a lot of times like people will judge themselves based on like the testimonials that they see from like a coach like us and what we post, like, and if they're not matching the type of person that is in that testimonial, they're like, oh, well then I can't do that program, or I don't meet the prerequisites, or like I'm not already into the gym, so I can't, maybe I should just lose the weight first and then I can do the program or something. So we wanted to talk about like what makes our successful clients successful. And I think the best place to start is like we're going to list out a bunch of stuff, and what's important to note is that the things that are not on our list are things like being able to dedicate 2 hours a day to the gym, or having knowledge on how to use a barbell, like or like how to do compound movements or do specific exercises, or already going to the gym or knowing how to meal prep or any of that. Like none of that, no skill or like experience level like is a part of this list, is I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about before we hopped on. Is I was like, ooh, that's a good one to talk about, because I think it's really important, especially like if we're posting like prep clients or something like that. It could be like, oh, I don't want to prep, or I don't want to get that lean, so this program isn't for me. Like, we work with everyone, and I think it's really important. And this is especially when I talk with this was actually part of my answer when I talked with this potential client, is I was like, well, it depends what your level of success is. And so for someone to be successful in the program, that may be very different from another person. Like one person might want to fix their relationship with food, and then another person might want to gain muscles, and then another person might want to lose fat. So it really just depends on what your version of success looks like. So I think that's really important when we're defining that, or if someone's coming into the program. So just because someone else, like a testimonial, is like, well, that's not what I need. Well, that's not necessarily what
That's not the point. Yeah,
that's not the point. So I think it's really important, like, to, again, give context before we dive into everything, is like success varies from person to person, but for everyone that we're going to be talking about, like, this is what allowed them to reach their level of success.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the thing is like for all these things that we're going to talk about, like it doesn't matter if the goal is weight loss, weight gain, a mental transformation, like the things that we have on this list do not like specify to one thing or the other. Like it's not like, oh, you have to have like a lot of weight to lose, otherwise you can't be successful. Like no, like it's what if you're underweight and you want to gain weight? Like, and really it's more about, and the reason why the title will probably say something along the lines of traits, it's about the traits of these people rather than like something that that they inherently have or don't have, based on their schedule or their lifestyle or something. And I think that's what a lot of people kind of like gravitate towards, is like categories, like, oh, like she's not a mom, so like, her program won't work for me because, I'm a mom and I have kids, and she just won't get it or something. Like, it's not an external circumstance that dictates whether or not you're going to be successful. I think that's really what I'm trying to get at, is we often think that success is attributed to external factors, when really it's all about the internal factors of like how you're utilizing any resource that you're given, or that you don't, or how resourceful you're being in the absence of resources. That was redundant, but you'll have to excuse my brain today. But yeah, so I think I thought of one to add to the list, but we can probably kind of just get started and start rattling them off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Well, let me just add this one in. And then I guess the first one that like honestly uh brings up the most, like the biggest train of thought for me, is just like being able to be flexible with your mind, whether that is being willing to actually learn something new or change your mind about something. And I think of this because I spoke with someone literally yesterday who I thought she was like a good fit at first based on what she was struggling with. But the more and more that we talked and the more that I dug, I was just like, I don't know if this woman's going to be successful, because she was very, very skeptical and unwilling to let go of prior things that were no longer serving her. And she actively admitted that, like, okay, yeah, I used to be super strict. I used to never eat sugar. I used to be super regimented, but it didn't last. And she would say that, but then I would explain my approach and how we do things. And she would be like, oh, I don't know about that. Like, I think I need more structure. I think I need to be more rigid. I think I need to cut out sugar or whatever it is. And I was like, but you just told me that doesn't, that didn't work. That didn't stick. And she was like, yeah, you're right. It didn't, but I think I need more structure. And I was just like, we're talking in circles. And needless to say, like, and I think a lot of these issues kind of work themselves out on something like a discovery call or sales agreement. Like, I didn't sell her because like she wasn't sold, because her mind was getting in the way. So like, thank God I didn't take her money, because that would have been probably a bad situation. Now if she comes around and she's like, actually, I am open to trying something new. And that's something I was very upfront with her on. And I was like, hey, listen, the only way that this is going to work is if you're willing to unlearn that shit and learn a new way of thinking about all of this. And I will arguably say that the people with the most prerequisites and knowledge are oftentimes the hardest to work with, because they have like a background that they're proud of. So like this woman was also like in a previous time like a health coach for others. And so she was like, oh, I went to school here for this, and like I learned it this way, and this was what I was taught. And I was just like, yeah, but you just told me that you have all these issues that you've been stuck with for over a year, and you're really frustrated and you don't know how to fix it with all the knowledge that you do have. So like, where do we go from here? So again, I think these issues will, like, they'll pan themselves out. I don't think people are going to end up in really shitty situations where, like, sometimes they do, where they're paying money and they're not getting what they need or not seeing any changes because they are stuck in that frame of mind. But usually, like, we filter through that by having a good screening process. But yeah, that was my experience the other day. I was like, just thinking back on it, I'm like, I'm kind of glad we didn't move forward.
Yeah, I have had a couple instances, and like you said, it's like almost like the more background, the more experience they have into fitness, they're like the least likely to change, because they're kind of set in their ways, or they have an expectation of what they think they need. And so they'll kind of fight you throughout the process and try to get you to change X, Y, whether it's their nutrition or their fitness back to what they want, not necessarily. So they don't really give the program a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's one thing to it's one thing to like actually follow a program, but like paying someone money to try to warp them into doing what you were already doing that wasn't working for you in the first place, that's not coaching. Like that's paying for someone to be your cheerleader, and enable your bad habits. So yeah, like basically the point being like you have to be willing to like do something different and to learn something new. And like we say it all the time, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And it's just interesting because like, you know, it comes up in all these different facets of life and different people where like they're stuck in that pattern. Um, and so it kind of just comes down to like having a growth mindset and like humility, like and being able to admit like I don't know it all and I'm willing to learn and I'm capable of learning. And there's kind of two parts to that. Like sometimes people are not in the belief or of the belief that they are capable of learning anything new. Like I hear this a lot with people who say like, well, I'm just stubborn or that's just the way that I am, or you know, they tell themselves these stories and therefore they believe them that they're not capable of changing or being any better as a human being. Um so on one hand, someone might not believe that they're capable of change, and then on the other hand, someone might think that you know the forces of the world are against them and that like they can't from external circumstances. It's not just I am this way, but like, oh, all these things are making it impossible for me to X, Y, and Z. When in reality, like we always have a choice. Like our circumstances may not be great and we might have two shitty choices to choose from, but there's always a better choice. So um so yeah, just being willing to open your mind a little bit and be flexible in one way or another.
Yeah. So I have two clients in mind. One was successful and one was not. And so we interviewed a client yesterday for our office hours. And this is what one of the things that also prompted this like kind of like, hey, why were you successful? Like when we walked her, like I walked her through her journey with us, and she was able to lose over 20 pounds with a cut. Now she is reverse dieting and she's maintaining that weight loss, which is incredible. She's eating basically the exact same from when she started her cut, but she's maintaining 20 pounds less. So
Wow.
yeah, just an absolutely incredible transformation. But we're also coming up on like our 2-year anniversary of coaching. So we've worked together a really long time. So we did talk a lot about maintenance and everything. And so, but one thing I did point out to her when we were talking was when she first started her cut, she was like talking about, oh yeah, this. And I was like, but do you remember in the beginning, you didn't lose any weight for almost 5 weeks? And she's like, oh yeah. And I was like, because I remember in your check-in, you said like, I'm really scared. I'm not gonna be able to lose weight. Like this is a pattern. Anytime I tried to, and you can hear my other co-host in the background. um, but she was like, I'm afraid that I'm not gonna be able to lose weight. Like this is just classic of me. And so what I really want to point out is you can have clients go like one or two ways. Like the one client that was successful, she told me that she let me know how she was thinking, but she didn't deviate from protocol. She continued to do what I asked her to do, even though she was skeptical and felt like maybe this is not going to work for me. That didn't change her actions. And so I have another client who we asked her like, hey, like you are doing all of these into high intensity like group classes, you're not eating very much, like hey, let's try to tone it down a little bit. But she didn't change her ways. She never gave anything a chance. And so she didn't try anything at all. And so she didn't even really complete any of the program because she didn't change anything. Whereas this one client, like she continued to execute her protocols day in, day out, and she ended up losing 20 pounds. And so like, and that's what I told her. I was like, that was a very pivotal turning point, because for a lot of people, if they're dieting for 5 weeks and don't see any weight loss, there are so many people that are just going to throw in the towel and say, this isn't working for me. This program's not working. So it is very frustrating. And I know because, and you too, like we've been in in a fat loss phase before and have not seen any progress. And it is so frustrating. But from our experience with dieting, we know like, I just need to keep doing. So like, I just need to keep showing up, keep putting in the effort. And if I know that I'm doing it, like something is going to happen, like something is going to change as long as I'm consistent. So just the willingness to try something new, even if you're skeptical about it, like your coach is there for a reason. They want you to be successful. Like we don't want to like throw you on protocols and just take your money. Like we want to see you be successful after the program ends.
Yeah, well, and it's also like on a business side, it's in our best interest to make our clients successful as well. Because if our clients are successful, then there's more word of mouth, there's more referrals, there's longer retention of clients, and better just overall, like if we're talking about like taking people's money, like there's more of that. Like if we are helping our clients, if we're actually helping people. So like I think a lot of times like people get it backwards, and there's this just very severe lack of trust from as a whole in like the online coaching space, which I get, like it's a new thing, especially if you're from a generation that's a little older, like it's weird, right? But like at a certain point, if you're gonna do something and you're gonna pay someone money to help you with it, there has to be, I think the next thing on the list is a certain level of like trust and leap of faith of like, you have to give it a real go. Otherwise, like, what are you even doing? So trust, I would say, is one that's not even on our list that I think is huge. And trusting the process for like an actual good amount of time. Like if you spend, like, I would probably put the cap at like maybe 4 to 6 months of like really, following the protocols to a T and like not seeing any change, like not even like, oh, the scale didn't move, but my body composition changed, but like nothing, right? Like I would say like 3 months of like really dialing it in and like nothing changes. And like if you're like at 6 months and like you've seen some changes, but just not all the ones that you want, like maybe there's like more that can be done there. But like that's a long time. Like most people don't make it 4 days trusting a process. Like, and that's really where like that's why I know we like have a minimum amount of time that we work with people. Like it's like you're gonna do at least 90 days here, because like that's the minimum of if you can follow it, then it will pan out with something by the end of that time. But a lot of times it like takes the first month or two for someone to like even get their bearings and get consistent, and then like 4 weeks go by and we've been consistent, we can start to see some changes. But like it's just a process, like, and you have to be willing to put your trust in someone other than yourself, which is scary, and you're allowed to be skeptical. But like Christina said, your feelings don't need to dictate your actions.
Yeah. So we do have that on here as far as communication, like trusting the process, but also not being afraid to ask questions. So I think that that's really important, because it's like you trusting your coach, but then also you like not being afraid to say like, hey, why are we doing this? Like, what is the reason behind it? Because hopefully your coach is letting you know like, hey, this is why we're doing X, Y, Z. So hopefully you don't have to ask. But if you do need to, if you want like a more in-depth explanation, because if you have buy-in, if you understand why you're doing something, that's going to make following your protocols a lot easier. So communication, I would say, and that I think that was also probably one of my number one answers to her, is like clients that communicate with us are the ones that see results, because they're letting us know, hey, I am, doubting this, or, hey, this is great. I love when you send video replies, or I love when you do X, Y, Z, because that allows us to be a better coach for you, because we know more of what you like, how you like things explained, like whatever it may be. And then we also know if you're not enjoying something or if you need more help. That allows us to give you a better experience. So just like communicate. Like there probably is a level of over communicating, but we'd rather you do that than not hear from you at all. And then just be like, hey, I'm not enjoying the process. Cause we'd be like, what? Like, we had no idea. If you were feeling like, don't allow your feelings to fester. And I think it's also like giving your coach the and I'm like thrown off because Marissa just gave me a look because she's given me that feedback, which is hilarious. But like giving your coach an opportunity to correct something, because if they don't know that something's wrong, they have no idea that you're feeling a certain way, which yes, hilarious.
Oh, okay. That had I love that you just pioneered that as well. But yeah, communication. I mean, I don't think I have too much to add to that, like, but yeah, just communicate. Like recently, like actually today, we got an email from a client who has basically ghosted us for 3 weeks. And they were essentially like, I don't know, like this is just a me thing, like the technology's hard and this and that. And we were kind of just like, all right, well, like this has gone on for 3 weeks. We haven't been able to get a hold of this person. Like we've been reaching out, and like at the end of the day, like this would have been helpful to know on like week one. So we could have like fixed it earlier. So just know that like if you are, hiring a coach, they most likely want to help you. So like if you don't tell them how to do that, they're going to be taking more stabs in the dark. And we had someone not recently, but a couple of months ago, one of our clients asked one of our coaches, she was just like, hey, I really just want to like impress you and like get like more like praise from you. Like, and she's an athlete. So like she loves like pleasing her coaches. Like that's a desire as well that we have, like when we hire someone to tell us what to do, like we want to make them proud, right? And like for that coach, she was like, oh my God, like I've just been diving into like troubleshooting on every check-in. I haven't been like giving positive regard or like celebrating the wins as much. Like, and it just completely slipped her mind, not because the person wasn't doing well. She was doing great, but like she just kind of forgot because it was like so consistent that like she's like, oh yeah, she does great all the time. Like, I don't need to tell her that, but like she told her, hey, I would love some like more positive regard from you. And ever since then, their coaching relationship has like flourished because now they're both getting what they need. Like the coach is getting feedback on how to be a better coach. And the client is getting, not only the feedback that they need, but so the praise and everything like that. And so it really does make a difference. Even the smallest thing of like, hey, I'm feeling like this isn't going to work. Okay, great. Let's talk about that because there's most likely more shit packed into that. Like, okay, I'm afraid this isn't going to work. The client you mentioned, Christina, who was like, 5 weeks, I'm not seeing any changes. I'm feeling skeptical about it. Like, I mean, like that takes a certain level of vulnerability too, which I think could be added to the list, like being okay with being vulnerable and authentic and expressing your fears. And how she mentioned like, oh, this is a cycle for me. Like, okay, what does that mean? Like, and then let's unpack that and like, what is this cycle? How do we break it? And like the client can then come to the answer themselves, like, oh, the way to break this cycle is to keep going even when I don't feel like it or don't see progress, because every other time I've quit. And so like taking like people's vulnerability and their openness to communicate and using that as a coaching tool, like that's something that we can also do when someone does communicate.
Yeah. And so it's interesting too, because I feel like for that client who was saying like, hey, I would like to know that I'm doing well. A lot of times with our coaching, we don't want to say, I'm so proud of you. Like, da, da, da. Like, we don't do that because like, then you're just getting like, again, it's like, you're just pleasing your coach rather than like being proud of yourself and being proud of your own actions. So it could have been a thing from the coach saying like, hey, this is why I typically don't do this, but if you're letting me know that this is really important, like absolutely. And so I think that's another just a really good example of how we don't coach every single client the exact same way. It's based on what you need and what you're telling us that you need.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was something that I was thinking about. Like that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why we don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would also say on the note of communication, like it's not just with your coach, but successful transformations often require communication with those around you. So your spouse, especially, or significant other is a huge one. Family, coworkers, friends, like whoever's in your life, like communicating with them because unfortunately, I have seen like people not reach their goals because of an unwillingness to either ask for help or communicate their needs, or um, even just like let their significant other in the know about what they're trying to do. And like, you can, listening to this, you can probably imagine how that might affect someone if like your significant other doesn't know that you're trying to lose body fat. Like, okay, well, they're probably not going to pay mind to where they want to go to dinner or what snacks you want to have before bed, and they're probably just gonna carry on with their normal life. And if it's not like the lifestyle that you want to lead, it's going to cause a lot of friction and issues. And so we've recently talked a lot with some clients, I mean, a number of clients. And I think this is something you can always work on and it can always get better, even myself. And I'm sure Christina as well. But like when it comes to like your significant other or the people around you, being able to consistently communicate, like, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And like, how can the people around you help you with that? And it's not an imposing, like, okay, I'm dieting now, so neither of us can have any sweets in the house or whatever. Like, it's not going to be like that. But sometimes just being like, hey, I'm going to be working on my health and my well-being, and I would absolutely love your support with it. I'm open to any ideas that you have that, you might want to help in that regard. Like, but no pressure. You don't have to join me, but this is something that I'm going to be doing. Like, sometimes just saying that to your significant other, making them aware of what you're trying to do, can be one of the biggest factors in you actually succeeding. Because if you go back to the episode where we talked about my wedding diet, shredding for the wedding, one of the biggest factors for me being able to be consistent was like Aaron also dieting, because it was just like, okay, we were on the same page, rather than like him eating fast food every other day and picking up Chick-fil-A 3 times a week, and me trying to stay on track. So makes a huge difference. So communicating and like learning communication skills in all regards, which honestly, what I found just by working with more and more adults is that like we don't get taught this stuff unless we like work in sales or communications. We don't get taught this stuff. And a lot of people do not develop the right communication skills, if at all, ever, unless they are, put in a container like this where they like are actively working on these things, and it forces them to have those conversations. So yeah, enough on communication, but yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, and I think that actually it's a nice transition, flows really nicely to emotional regulation and self-awareness. So like having those communication skills, or knowing like, hey, maybe I don't communicate that well, so that's something I need to work on. Like that's something like I can let my coach know, like, hey, sometimes I don't let you know if something's going wrong. So if you could just check in with me, often, or something like that. Like just again, just giving your coach a little bit of a heads up, and just knowing things about yourself or your tendencies that you have. Like when you talked about the client that didn't communicate for 3 weeks, we had a similar situation where on the call, she's like, hey, I don't know, I'm kind of like wishy-washy. And she's like, I have a tendency to self-sabotage. And I was like, all right, well, we're holding you accountable. Like we're holding you every step of the way. And what did she do? Like she's just ghosted and ghosted and ghosted. And we continued to follow up with her. We're like, hey, we know that you do this. Like, we're here for you. Like, just letting you know. Like, and it's just not like, hey, where are your check-ins? Like, where's this? Like, where is that? Just, hey, we're here for you. We're here for, we're thinking about you, like letting you know. And she came back and she was like, I'm so sorry. Like, this is what I do when I'm struggling. Like, thank you for continuing to check in all the time. But like, we did that because we had an idea. She communicated that with us, and she had that self-awareness to like, this is probably what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it comes to being able to change your mind and have a growth mindset around it, like, then the next step, like, okay, you just keep telling yourself that this is what you do. So how do you think you're going to behave? Like, let's change that. Like, let's change the
Right.
story that you tell yourself, because it doesn't have to be true. Um, but yeah, so I put like emotional regulation and self-awareness on here, kind of just like, I mean, from just in the fact that like people really operate on a spectrum when it comes to these two things. So they like I kind of lump them together, but they're a little different. But like self-awareness, meaning like you understand your own patterns and tendencies and you can see them like as an observer. And emotional regulation is like when stressful shit happens, like you can actively catch yourself in the moment of like, okay, I'm feeling very this way. And I do or I will or will not act on it. Like being able to actually make that decision because there are people, plenty of people who don't recognize that they have that power of I'm feeling this way. So therefore I must act this way, right? Like if somebody triggers me, therefore I must react or be defensive or argue versus someone with a high emotional EQ is what it's called, but emotional regulation ability. They might be really triggered by something, but be able to kind of just like breathe through it and not react and just respond in a graceful way. And so I think it's just kind of like a subcategory of self-awareness as a whole. But the reason why this is important is because like this is this is something that can be built. People who have more of this coming in have an easier time with making changes and stopping self-sabotaging patterns because they can see them instead of just like having it kind of happen and then realizing it after the fact. But you know, I put this in here to say that like the more you have, you will be at a slight advantage because it's just going to allow for you and your coach to have more dialogue around the patterns and the behaviors and the things that are not serving you that need to change. But it's also something that can very easily be built if you're willing to do so, which again goes back to the willingness to learn something new or change your mind about it. Is if you are kind of an ignorance is bliss type of person and you just kind of float through life and kind of let it happen to you, you have to be willing to change that and you have to be willing to start really observing yourself. And sometimes the best way to do that is through things like journaling and meditation practices and developing self-awareness by actually practicing mindfulness on a regular basis. A lot of times the tools that we give our clients as coaches is there to facilitate that. For example, asking a client to check in on how hungry or full they are throughout the day, throughout the week, and report that is facilitating self-awareness because someone might not pay attention to how hungry or full they are or what they're even putting in their mouth or their body until we ask them to, and then they're like, oh shit, I'm doing all this is why I'm not in shape, like this is like, and sometimes like that's the light bulb moment, is using a coach to get the tools to start to implement that. But I will say, like, the more that there is and the more you practice this, and this is something you could start practicing right away, just start observing what the heck are you actually doing? Why are you doing it? What are your patterns, your tendencies? And just kind of like taking note of all of it, you can get better at self-awareness very quickly. So it's definitely something that if you want to see a transformation in yourself, I would say the first step of knowing what to change is being able to see what you're currently doing in all facets of life. So yeah, that one is like, people come in with different amounts of it, but it's something that can really be built as well.
Yeah, and something that you actually just kind of sparked is I love the mindfulness, and that's something that we touch on a lot, right? Is like we need to have those healthy habits. And it's not just, okay, if I follow these magical macro numbers and I do these workouts and I'm going to get shredded, right? Like it's a lot deeper than that. So it's almost like having someone have this like macro view where they're able to see the larger picture and like, okay, I'm establishing these habits, so therefore in the long term I can, do XYZ. But also being able to be, bless you.
Ooh, thank you.
Being able to be in the present, like the here and now, and kind of focus on just what do I need to do today. So
Yeah.
it's like having that ability to like zoom out, but then also just kind of like, what do I just need to focus on today? Like, this is what my coach said I need to do. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do it day in, day out, and know like that they have my back.
Oh yeah, like being too focused on like the bigger picture can be super overwhelming and can absolutely stop you in your tracks. So we always like to say like, yeah, you should like kind of get an idea of what the bigger picture is. Like, I don't know, is that like 50 pounds? Is it like stepping on stage? Is it being super jacked? Is it whatever? But like, if you look at where you are compared to where you want to be, there's probably a pretty big gap there, right? So what like that can be overwhelming. We can think, oh man, I'll never get there. And then we just don't do anything. But instead looking at, all right, well, like lay one brick at a time if I want to build a wall. So, okay, the first brick, what is that? Put that down and then just focus on the one brick you need to lay. And eventually you'll look up and be like, oh shit, a big wall. Like, but it takes time and patience. So like know what you're building, but at the same time, go one brick at a time. Is definitely a good mindset to have going into any sort of transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like I feel like a lot of these just kind of like overlap, and there's
Yeah.
not like really one thing that we're like talking about, like because we're like kind of bouncing all over the place. But I think that like being able to like zoom out, but then also like if you're having difficulty, like again, we go back to that over communication, like asking for help, but then also being accepting of feedback or understanding
Yeah.
like, hey, like there's a method to my coach's madness. Like there's a reason why I'm doing this. And if you feel like, I don't know, if you don't feel aligned with that, like being willing to accept the feedback and recognize like, okay, I'm doing this for this specific purpose, even if I'm not seeing a return on that investment right now, like I'm probably will in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, like, I think I saw a friend of mine actually repost this from Andrew Huberman. It was like a reel today on Instagram that I saw. And basically all Andrew Huberman said was like, most people want answers. Like they ask, like, what's the best way to biohack my sleep or, have better mood or have more energy or whatever. And people want the answers. They're asking for the help. But like the majority of them are just not serious about actually listening to that advice or like putting in the work that's required to actually see the change. And so, like, this is a two-parter because, yes, asking for help is often the barrier for a lot of people. Like, literally, that alone can like trip people up because they're like, I hate asking for help because there's pride associated with that we have to drop and we have to be humble. And that's hard for, especially for people who feel like they're go, go, go and they can do it all themselves. But then the second part of that is if you ask for help, like also being willing to actually do whatever you're told when you ask for help. And those are very, very separate things. So yeah, that's a really good one. And yeah, just not being afraid to ask for help. Yeah, we do this like even with like my staff, like something that I've really been trying to do lately is like cultivate a community of staff that are not afraid to ask any question. And just making sure that anytime someone asks a question that they're praised for it, because a lot of times we like get in our heads that we can't ask stupid questions, which they don't exist. Like if you don't know something and you have a question about it, guess what? It's not stupid because clearly you just don't know something. And you need to learn it. So yeah, I mean, hopefully you're in an environment where you're not ridiculed for asking for help. But if you are able to get advice when you ask for help, actually do it because that gives you the best chance at succeeding.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like another thing too, and these kind of go hand in hand, is kind of again the same thing asking for help. Is like, okay, but maybe again, no question is stupid, but like also have you tried to learn on your own? Have you Googled it? Have you tried to like ask in a Facebook group? Like have you done anything to try to seek out some sort of resource, or have you taken advantage of the resources that the coaching program offers you? So if they have office hours, if they have different resources maybe in like a Google Drive or like PDFs or anything like that, like have you taken advantage? Have you used any of those? Have you tried to seek out the answers? Because I feel like again, like if you're just waiting for your coach to give you all the answers and you're not necessarily asking anything, like you know, and we always say like part of what is that?
Oh, can you hear the vacuum?
Yeah, that's super loud.
Ah, shit. Well, I'll have Shane edit it out.
He should probably not. That's gonna be hard to edit out.
Okay. Do you want me to tell Aaron to stop vacuuming?
Yeah, sorry, it's really loud. Sorry.
It's okay. Is it better now?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't hear it at all now.
Okay. Because he's still doing it. He's just farther away.
Okay.
I texted
Yeah.
him. I don't
Okay.
know if we'll see it.
So yeah, so are you taking advantage of the resources that are available to you, or are you sitting there waiting for things to come to you? Like that's a really big, I guess, factor of a client being successful.
Yeah. So like with resourcefulness though, like I think definitely like something, at least something that I am trying to instill again with my team, and like that I hope that my coaches bring to their clients as well, is like kind of like encouraging resourcefulness with asking questions rather than just being like, okay, do all the research on your own, and then when you've exhausted everything, like then come to us, because then
Oh
it's
yeah.
like we wasted time, right? So like when it comes to being resourceful, like maybe like try to figure it out on your own for a little bit, but like as soon as you're like, no, I'm stuck, like ask for help, and maybe like be like, here's the solutions that I think that I'm thinking about, like are any of these right or are they off, like where to go from here, right? Like so a lot of times if I have a staff member ask me a question, I try to return another question, which is really annoying, but like I'll just be like, what would you do if I gave you no guidance? Like if you got no feedback, what would you do here? And then I make them think through, what would I do here? I would do this and that and that and that. And then I'll be like, okay, I would keep that part, maybe get rid of that part, but like you're on the right track here. And then what does that do? Builds confidence in that person that like, oh, I probably do have the answers. Like if I just thought about it a little bit more differently. And then eventually they'll, start coming to someone with not only a question, but like, here's the potential solutions that I have. And so when it comes to clients asking questions, like, and sometimes like I ask a question back because I just need more information, but like other times I'll be like, all right, great. So this is a problem. Or you're, nervous about going out of town for the weekend or something, like what's your plan of action, and like making them think through that, and then they'll come to me with like, I was going to do this and this, and like usually it's something along the lines, if they're traveling, of like mindful eating, focusing on protein, making sure they're hydrated, and I'm like, great. So like did you really not know what to do? And again, it goes back to like we're telling ourselves a story that like we don't know how to stay on track on the weekends. In all actuality, we might actually know how to do it, but we're just nervous that we might not be able to follow through. Maybe we need some reassurance that we do know what to do. And so, absolutely, please be resourceful, but also know that like you probably have more answers in your own brain than you think. But sometimes someone just needs to draw it out of you. So come with questions, but also think through like, okay, what might be some solutions that I could pitch out here that I could see myself doing. And then my coach can further help me, because now they not only know my question, but they know potentially the directions we could go in for them to help me.
Yeah, and that's actually something that made me think about the idea of being flexible too, with like resourcefulness, and you were talking about going like, on the weekends, and I was thinking about like traveling. Like we have some clients who will be like, well, I didn't have access to my normal gym, so I just didn't do any workouts. Like I just didn't do anything, rather than just kind of like, okay, well, being resourceful, like going to that gym and like being able to modify some exercises, or maybe just kind of being like, hey, for a couple days, like I'm just not going to have access to my normal programming, but I'm going to do something. Like, so I don't know if resourcefulness is like kind of the same thing, but maybe just yeah, I don't know if it's the same thing, but to me it's like being resourceful of like what you have access to as well, but just kind of being flexible and just like recognizing that like you don't have to follow everything to a T. And I guess maybe that's going away from like the all or nothing mentality, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
like, well, I have to hit my macros 100% or I'm just not doing anything at all. Like, on the weekends, or like, if I don't have access to my gym, I'm just not going to do anything at all. Like I'm just, so being able to kind of adapt, be resourceful, and do like your best with what you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say that like felt to me like the all or nothing thinking, and like being more flexible with like what success looks like to you.
Yeah.
So like if your definition of success is following the plan to a T and hitting your macros within 5 grams and getting 6 workouts in all at the same gym, like yeah, any deviation of that is a failure. But like what if you just adjusted your definition to what it actually takes to see results, which is usually not something as stringent as that. It's usually something along the lines of like if you're in a fat loss phase, keep your calorie deficit, make sure to hit your protein, make sure you're moving your body regularly and providing it with a progressive stimulus whenever possible. Like that's truly what causes fat loss in that instance. So like why would you need to hit your macros to, within 5 grams? You don't. So like adjust your definition, get away from the all or nothing of like if I can't do anything, or if I can't do the perfect way, then I won't do anything at all. Like just be flexible with it. Like for example, we had one client who literally went from like someone told her that she needed to zero out her macros to the gram, and she was constantly self-sabotaging because she was like, I can never be perfect, this and that. And then like all one of our coaches did for her was like, hey, I want you to just stay within 10 grams above or below. And like her mind exploded. It absolutely exploded. And she was like, holy shit, I'm so consistent. Like this is what success is. And like progress immediately better, self-sabotage immediately way less. Like it's insane. So like just change your definition of success to get away from the all or nothing thinking. And again, that goes back to, are you willing to change your mind about how you think about things? Because if you're not willing to do that, there's not a lot of room that a coach has to help you change.
Yeah, but I don't think I have anything else to say. I feel like we've exhausted our list and done a pretty good overview of what I feel like success is for clients.
Yeah. I will just say community, like it's
Yeah.
been a really big part of like our program that we've like really doubled down on. And I do see a difference in the people that are a part of the community and are active in it versus the ones that aren't. It's not always. Some people are, fine being a lone rider and just working with one coach. But what I found is like sometimes you just don't know that you need it until you are in it and you're like, holy shit, all these people understand me. Like they know what I'm going through. And like I have some clients that I've been working with for like years and years that like just started coming to our office hours, and they're like, oh wow, it's actually really validating to like be here. Like, it's actually really cool. And like one person who just started the program, she um she had worked with me when I was training people in person back in 2015, 2016. And she was like dead set on like just working with me and like all this. And I was like, you know what? Give my coach a try. Like, I think you'll like her, and come to the office hours. I'll be there and we'll hang out. Like, so she came to the calls, and like she just like is kind of really closed off and shy. And as soon as people started sharing what they were going through, like after the office hour, we got an email from her where she was just like, holy shit, thank you so much for the community you've created.
Mm.
Like I don't have people like this in my life, and this is really something special. Like you just don't realize like containers like that are not normal. Like a group of people all dedicated to personal development and growth and health and well-being. Like I'm sorry, that's not common. So like when you have a container like that, it really makes a difference. So community is just the last one I'll say. It's not an always thing, but we tend to see that people make more strides more quickly when they're exposed to other people that are going through the same things that they are.
Yeah, I love that. And I was thinking about it. We had a couple clients who their family is not very accepting of them trying to change, and them turning down, like even like alcohol, or saying like, no, I don't want XYZ, like, and having their family like really give them pushback. It's hard to go through that by yourself. And then
Yeah.
to text or like get on and talk with a bunch of women who are doing the exact same thing, or be like, hey, this is what worked for me. Or like, yeah, I struggled with that a couple years ago. And now this is how, like, it just, it opens your eyes to like the possibilities of whether it is a tactic, like a tangible takeaway, or something to look forward to. Like, hey, this worked for this person. Maybe it'll work for me. So definitely lean in to your community if you have if you have that available to you within your coaching container, that it's really important. And like Marissa's saying, like, even if you feel like, oh, I'm not necessarily like a group person, I don't really like to share, or whatever, like you might be really surprised what you could take away and learn from another person.
Yeah, I mean, even I say that shit. I'm like, I don't like group stuff. I don't want to go to the group calls, whatever. Every time I do, I'm like, all right, I didn't regret that. And then when I meet the people in person, like the retreats where we like actually get together, like as a mentorship group with like my business coaching group that I'm in, like that alone is worth the money that I'm spending. And like I tell that to every single person like that would ask. But like, and I'm not like, oh yeah, I'm a group person, but like it's just like when you connect with people that like really are in your shoes, there's nothing like it. And like I've always been someone who's like, well, I'm just different, and like I just don't get along with like other girls or like other people. Like I just don't think there's that many people out there for me that like we can be good friends. That's a lie. It's a story you're telling yourself. Like there are people that will truly see you and get you and can connect deeply with you. They're probably just not the people that are in closest proximity to you. And like you have to put yourself in rooms like that. Shameless plug for the live event.
Alrighty. Well, that was a really good overview of everything that we look forward to
She's
in
like,
our.
fuck that.
Now, as I've got to get a little one out of his high
I got
chair.
you.
So,
You're good.
so yeah. So again, like what's on this list or what's not on this list, right? Is like the number of hours that you have available. Having a background knowledge or any level of experience, like that's not what it's about. Is you can come into this program, or not this program, you can come into a coaching container just with a willingness to learn and being open to changing your mind, having a growth mindset, and getting away from, the all or nothing mentality and thinking, having some mental flexibility, being okay with change and knowing that your coach has your back, and having the emotional regulation, self-awareness, being resourceful, but again, not being afraid to ask for help, and then listening and accepting that feedback, being an active participant, engaging in the community that's provided, and communicate. We
Yeah.
can say that enough. And then again, just having that trust that your coach has your back, but also not being afraid to ask questions. So I think that was a really, really good overview. And hopefully if you're still listening, you feel like you can take better advantage of the container that you're in.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely send this episode to a lot of people.
Yeah, well, awesome. We hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. You can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Christy Lynn Fit. Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope to see you back next week.